number one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 307 of Sports Card Nation. Going to keep the intro short and sweet. Tell you who this week's guest is. He goes by the name of Andrew Crossett. He is from Northern New York. He is the proprietor of Northern New York Promotions, and he has built a successful show in Watertown, New York, but he has expanded to other locations, and we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about promoting shows, and he makes it look easy, but as those in the hobby know, promoting a show is a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. So we're gonna pick Andrew's brain about how he built a small show into what's become a juggernaut and how he's expanded what he does as well. So quick 30-second break, and we'll be right back with Andrew Crossett.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.
All right, happy to have my next guest on the Sports Card Shop guest line. He is a man like me, who wears some different hats in the hobby. He's a collector, a dealer, and now a promoter. And as someone who's set up at his shows as a dealer, he does a great job with his shows. We're going to talk about all three of those hats he wears. But happy to have Andrew Crossett on Sports Card Nation for the first time. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, John.
All right. So let's start. It's the standard, Andrew, kind of first time on the pod, kind of where it all began. Like, where did when and how did the hobby start for you?
So as a kid, I definitely loved baseball. Was my thing. I loved it. My parents, my grandparents all were Yankee fans. So I quickly became a Yankees fan, and it evolved into being an everything baseball. Definitely was a baseball card collector starting probably at age 5. And, the average teenager, I thought it was, boring. I got out of it. And about pre-COVID, a couple years before COVID, I got back into it heavy on the dealer side of things.
Yeah, and I like you're wearing my Mets jersey, not my jersey, but my favorite team jersey there. So they just at the time of this recording, they just tied the series up 1 game apiece with the Dodgers in the NLCS. Now, you can correct me. You're in the Ogdensburg area. Is that right? New York.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you originally from there? Like, are you born and raised and you're still there type of deal?
Yeah. So my entire life, I've actually been from Ogdensburg. So
okay, because I want to focus. I want to focus on Northern New York, and when we get into like the shows. You brought shows to an area that really needed it, I believe, and I'm sure you agree with me. But even when you got into collecting as a kid during that era, where could you go to buy cards? Were there LCSs then, or was it kind of, for me, like even in New York City, it was kind of the corner store? But again, I'm older than you too, so it's a different era.
Yeah, so when I was a collector, there was Walmart, but that was about it, unless you wanted to drive 45 minutes to an hour to an actual hobby store, and the closest one was in Watertown.
So you had to, like you said, you had the Walmart, but LCSs weren't in the same vein we're starting to see them now, where you're seeing more, put the open sign on the door and more accessible, maybe closer proximity. That wasn't the case, and now we're seeing that. How about shows? Did you attend any shows as a kid, or really there wasn't any to attend?
So when I was growing up, there actually was, I think it happened twice a year, there was a show in Ogdensburg. and as well as there were a few ones that were in Messina, about 40 minutes north of me. Nothing ever large. So I never, my first show was actually as a vendor. I set up at a small 18 vendor show in Messina and fell in love with it. And now it's everything. We travel anywhere up to 10 hours to a show.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know you definitely are dedicated, and we got, again, when we get into the more the promotion side of what you do, we'll talk about the work that goes in there and how you expanded your shows and what you do, and that. But when it comes to being a dealer, I mean, well, let's get into a little bit of the shows. I do your monthly Watertown one. I was, to full disclosure, I wasn't in there in your first one, but credit to you that buzz got real louder. And then in talking to you and doing the bulk subbing as I do for SGC, you're like, hey man, you wanna do this in Watertown? And at the time, I remember telling you, like, not knowing you obviously like I do now. I said, listen, I'll try it once. We'll see how it goes. I can't promise you. And I've never looked back. I'm there, weather permitting, which we haven't had any issues making a show, but everyone since, and you do a terrific job. What led to you throwing your hat into the promotion ring? Was it something you always had in the back of your mind, or you just said, hey, there's a need for this, or was it both?
So it was a little bit of both. So before I did the promoter side of things, for about 4 years, my partner Skip and I, we were traveling together on the show circuit. And it got to the point we were, going to a show every weekend in a different town. And we'd go to a show, our first time, we'd walk in and say, wow, that was something. We probably won't go back, but give them credit for what they're doing. And then finally, about 2 years after doing the show circuit, we're like, why don't we just do this? We know what the vendors want. We know what's needed in the hobby and where is a good community and where's not. So we decided let's just do it.
And the rest is history here. Let me ask you this. I'll get into the difficulties of being a promoter, because everyone thinks it's easy, right? But it's not as easy as sometimes it looks. But I'll ask you this. I promoted a couple shows in the 90s, so late 90s, so almost 30 years ago. Obviously, the hobby was a different hobby then, too. I did them at the Ramada, a small hotel, comparatively speaking. But, when you think about being a dealer, too, like being a dealer first and setting up at shows, I think it probably gives you an advantage, because I know it helped me out when I started promoting shows for the first time, again, 30 years ago. So it's a different hobby. But being on that side of the table first and then getting into the promotion of shows, do you think that helps you and gives you an advantage? And how do you see that?
Oh, definitely. By being on the vendor side of things first, you got to see customers nonstop. You met every customer at a show, where on the promoter side, you don't get to talk to every customer. You don't know what they're looking for. But by doing a vendor side for 2 years, I knew exactly what everyone came in for. And if you didn't have the right stuff at a show, you're getting walked by. So that's why now that we do these, we need 50% Pokemon, 50% non-sports, with the 50% of sports cards. But you can't just have, the 90s wax vendor. You got to have someone to meet all the criteria of these vendors that I never would have known if I didn't have the vendor side of things.
Yeah, and I also, and I think you'll agree with this too, Andrew, also as a vendor, right, kind of what you want to see at a show, or what your needs are, or accommodations, right? So now as the promoter of such, you're already in that mindset. You're in kind of both mindsets. You agree with that?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and anytime you have 30 or 40 different people that you're involved with, and that's what show promotion is, you got different personalities. You'll have someone like myself that's kind of a jokester, pretty laid back. Even if something like bothered me, I kind of come at it with a decent approach. And then you have others, right? Maybe you're a little different or a little more feisty, right out the bat. Yeah, talk about like dealing with like vendor personalities, because we're not all cookie cutters. We have, while some of our thoughts may be similar, in many cases they're different as well. Talk about sort of finding that balance, right? To try to please as many people as you can and not displease as little as you can.
Yeah, it definitely, that was probably the biggest struggle we had starting at, is we wanted to please every person that came and talked to us to want to be a vendor. And probably about 2 or 3 shows in, I had to sit down with the other promoter and we're like, we just can't have some of these personalities here. Some people just are not meant to be a vendor. And that's kind of what's the problem with us now, is every person that comes into a show thinks they are a vendor. It's the problem of COVID. Everyone became an online seller. So these personalities that we get, I probably spend about 100 hours a week working on show stuff. And it's talking to 100 to 200 different vendors that want to do shows. And I've learned you have to interview a person before you even let them into a show to figure out, are you a good fit? Do you have something that's going to sell? And if a vendor starts with you with an attitude, you don't want that at the show, because they're going to be the same way with a customer. And I've seen that at other shows I've been to, and it gives the whole show a bad vibe.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Almost like sort of a pre-show interview, just to see what someone's about. And, even though they're representing themselves, right, in their brand and their business, at your show, they're also representing the show you're putting on. I've never heard a promoter say that, and not, at least not in the terms you did, but it's a great point, right? Because even if you let them set up and your gut is telling you no, and then something happens, right? You're going to be sort of guilty by association, even though you technically didn't say what they said or did what they did. It happened on your watch, so to speak. And it kind of falls back on you. So I actually appreciate hearing you say that, because I don't think promoter, I don't want to speak for all promoters, but I'm sure there's some promoters that don't really even think about that, and yet you sort of have done your due diligence and you have. You want to kind of extend on that?
Yeah, like I've done so many shows, and there's been shows I've never even met the promoter in person. And I just didn't want to have that be on our end. I want it to be a personal experience. Every single vendor that walks in, I know them by their first name. We have a conversation in the morning, and it's just a good vibe to start the day. There's been shows where on the vendor side of things, I walk in and I can't find the promoter if I had a problem. So I couldn't tell them if something went wrong with their show or if something went well. I think the open communication is the biggest thing you have to have when you're a promoter.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, I've done that too, where especially on a larger show where I've set up and like I might have spoke to the promoter on the phone, but I don't know what he looks like, where he is, and you got to find him. And sometimes it can be kind of a wild goose chase, right? You're asking people, hey, where's so-and-so? Oh, I think he's over there. And then you go over wherever they tell you, like, no, I think he's over there. And so you're trying to find him. You're losing time. So it's a great point to like get to know people. And again, that's a two-way street, right? You want them to know you too, because it's your guys' event, and you want to have that open communication. What do you find? You don't have to obviously mention names. I'll throw myself under the bus. I know I bug you about like trying to set up as early as possible. So you'll get a text from me like, hey, or in person, like, hey, when's the earliest I can get in, and that sort of thing.
You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hobby News Daily is your homepage of the hobby, providing original writing, exclusive gem rate data, a daily morning minute podcast, and some of the best content creators in the hobby. Remember, hobbynewsdaily.com and at Hobby News Daily on social. Happy collecting!
Hi, I'm Isaac Albert, a longtime card collector and the co-founder of the Penny Sleever. My wife and I started the Penny Sleever with a simple premise in mind: to offer collectors top quality supplies at fair prices. We offer a full range of hobby supplies, and we'll get them to you fast. Whether you're looking for a 260-point magnetic for that oversized patch card, or a slew of semi-rigids for your next PSA submission, the Penny Sleever has you covered. Shop now at thepennysleever.com and use the promo code SCNation to get 10% off your first order. That's SC Nation for 10% off at thepennysleever.com. The Penny Sleever. Top quality supplies, fair prices.
We are back.
What's sort of the number is, maybe that's it, but what's sort of the number one like request? I don't want to say complaint, but number one like accommodation like most dealers are sort of, ask for.
I will say my biggest complaint as a promoter that I complain to the other promoter that does it with me is the people that reach out and they expect you to answer in 30 seconds. People that are doing this, most of us have full-time jobs like myself. Sometimes we can't answer. People seem to forget that these people running these large shows, they're human beings. They're not just this robot that, is a telemarketer that's, yep, you texted me, I'm getting back. The biggest one's actually food. I get hundreds of messages every show wondering, hey, is there a food truck? Is there going to be a kitchen open? Is this? I mean, I guess that's something that we kind of put on.
I'm guilty of that. I probably don't text you. I ask you more once I'm there or the day before. Like if I see you the day before, like I did this past week, just to make, I travel. It's an hour from Syracuse to Watertown. Not a big deal. But I brought subs with me. It's just how to play. For me, it's more planning ahead type of thing. And you do a good job, with having like a food truck there sometimes. But yeah, listen, I'm a fat kid, so I got to keep this gut up, and so I got to plan. Ahead. But so you would say that's probably number one.
I get the message at 3:00 in the morning. Hey, do I need to bring my coffee in the morning? That's the one that gets me, and I'm usually awake and I answer it, and I have to like delete the message 2 or 3 times before I finally hit send and say, "Yep, bring your own coffee."
Yeah, listen, I'm a coffee guy like that. I'm not. If you have to rely on a show promoter for your daily first coffee, you got there's a Dunkin' Donuts every half block. Like, and listen, they're not a sponsor, but I mean that's just stating the obvious, right? And if you like other coffees, gas stations make great coffee too, speedways, whatever your gas station of choice. Like, get a coffee. It's actually one of the first things I do, Andrew, when I leave for the show is I'm packed, but I stop at the gas station, and grab a coffee. Or I make one at home. I have a travel month. I'll make one at home. But to me, sometimes I'm just trying to get out the door. And so I'll just stop real quick at for me, it's Speedway, which is like a block from my house. Go in, grab a coffee, and on, up north I go. So, like, you'll never hear me ask you about, you won't get, that isn't me Andrew's talking about, folks. So that's someone else. I'll bug them about whether the food truck's going to be there or not, but not the coffee. I can fend for myself.
I had a vendor once ask me 5 times how they were going to get coffee, so I eventually just left and got him a coffee.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that shows your dedication, and well, maybe you should be selling coffee at the shows. I don't know. It sounds like maybe a side hustle there.
They actually do offer a coffee bar and a popcorn bar if I wanted to have it. I just didn't want to have to deal with it. Yeah,
no, your plate's pretty full. Let's go back to your first event in Watertown. For those listening, say when it was. And what I wanted to ask you, I never asked you this, even off the record in person, like how obviously the Watertown shows become very successful now. But looking back at that first one out the box, how nervous were you? Like, is this going to be good? Are people going to come? I know the news covered it, but as a promoter, and you're kind of going into the unknown at that point, like, what was your mindset? Were you on pins and needles? Were you pretty confident right out the box? Where was your mind at?
So we 100% expected to fail. I'm not going to lie. We started advertising 4 months in advance to our first show, which was in February of 23. So we were advertising in 22, trying to get this show going. And we're a week away from the show, and we don't even have half of the tables sold. And at the time, we only had 28 vendor tables. We're like, this is going to be a one-time thing. This is never going to take off. We were trying to there's some local stores in Watertown. We're trying to get them to get on board, join in, so we can use their social media contacts. And starting a show not in a town you're from, you don't know anyone. We're trying to find places willing to let us put flyers up, and the mall doesn't want it. You know, all these large box stores have this anti-advertising policy in them. So you're trying to find the mom and pop stores that want to help the local businesses. And we were struggling. And we got to the first day. We got there. Luckily, the business complex that we're in, they were great for us. They help us set up. They were helping us advertise. They were helping us find vendors that were reaching out to them. And luckily, we filled it. I think we filled it the day before. And we got there that morning. And we were like, we don't have enough help. We don't know what we're doing. This is our first time ever doing it. We were trying to be the help all of all. We'll help you bring your boxes in. We'll help you carry everything to your table. And then we got the show started, and for the first 5 minutes, there was a line of 30 people. And we looked at each other and we said, how did this happen? We didn't do any online promotion. It was all just flyers and word of mouth.
Yeah, or the organic way. You know what, though, Andrew? Sometimes that's the best way, at least in the beginning, right, is because you get that buzz going. It's something new. And first thing I saw was a news. I mean, the news came and covered it. And Watertown's not a small town. I mean, it's a military town. For those that don't know, there's a base, Fort Drum, that's there. So you have a military presence, which Fort Drum is not new. It's been there a while. So it's I lived in Watertown a couple of years back in the 80s, and it was a military town then as well. So it's been a military town a long time, but it has a smaller town feel than it probably actually is. And the news came out and covered it. That was the first I had heard of it. I think I saw it on Facebook, kind of a news blip, and then I got to meet you at the Syracuse show here, and then my friend Chad, who attended before me, and he's like, "Hey man, you really should think about doing a show." But it was really you, after talking to you, hey, like, why don't you do what you're doing here and bring it to Watertown? And like I said earlier on during our conversation, at the time I just said, yeah, I'll try it. I don't want to lock in and promise you I'll be there every month. Let's try it, see how it goes. And going back to my first Watertown show that you promoted, I was pleasantly surprised at how well I did, how many subs we wound up getting through the book right out the bat, right? And the rest is history, and I've been there each month ever since. And that's a kudos to you for like you said, you kind of were bracing for impact, thinking like, this might not be good, or we might not be successful. And you've obviously that's not the case now. Over a year later and year and months, right? And it's become for a small show, 40 tables or 40 dealers. It feels bigger than it probably actually is. And now you went from, like you said, like, hey, we have tables available, to now you have a waiting list. I mean, talk about the growth of your own show. Are you surprised or not necessarily?
So we plateaued pretty much in the beginning. We had the first show, we had the 28 tables. It was roughly about 20 vendors, and we were averaging 100 to 125 customers. That went on for probably 6 months. And then out of nowhere, it just took off. We had vendors calling that wanted to have tables. We were having extra customers, and we just needed to expand. And we now are up to where we have 65 tables, and we have a contact list of over 150 vendors that tried to get into our show. It's unbelievable how fast it took off. But I really think it's just, like you said, it's a small show, but it has that large show feel. You can't find another show where you get, a room full of this many people and every one of the vendors knows each other on a personal level. We all talk, we joke with each other, and we have a good time.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I'll speak from a dealer's perspective, going to that first Watertown show, my first Watertown show, not the very first one, and not being nervous, but like, hey, I'm going in here open-minded, but I'm not expecting like break any records by, that sort of thing. And like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. I've been there every Watertown show since. And like you said, I've gotten to know a lot of the other dealers. We joke around, have a good time, and regardless of what the final money tally is at the end of the day, and I'm not saying that's not important, we've had a fun day in the very least, at least with the camaraderie and joking and talking and being in that same fraternity as hobbyists and vendors and that sort of thing. And so it feels bigger than it actually is. And in many respects, like, someone who's done bigger shows before, I've had days there where I've done numbers that are comparable to a bigger show, fairgrounds or out of state shows that I've done in the past. And so that's impressive that you've brought it to that level. And that, I went from that first show that I did to being like not knowing what to expect, Andrew, to like really counting the days down to the next one and really looking forward to it. And there's no nerves, right? It's just, hey, it's showtime. And again, a tip of the cap to you for bringing it to that level from that, the way you described the first one where you were scrambling to fill table space, scrambling to get people to work with you or help you and get the word out, and where you are to today. And now you've expanded your show boundaries, right? I just did one with you. You did one in Fulton, the hometown of my best friend Chad Merritt, who pretty much peer pressured me. I'm not gonna lie, I already told you this. He peer pressured me into doing it. And anyone, with all due respect to Fulton, New York, to anyone listening that either knows it or, it's not a huge city. It's not a mecca when in your mind you think of when we're talking about hobby or sports cards or non-sports cards. And, I set up at that show kind of not expecting much, quite frankly, and had a great show and did very, very well. And was shocked. I remember driving home. I know I told you this off the air, so to speak. Driving home, saying that's crazy. First time show in a smaller city, at least smaller when compared to Watertown, and yet to do that right out of the gate in the first time. And even though you're experienced now, that's the first. Going into a new city is not the same as doing an established show, and you hit it out of the park, at least if you ask me, based on how I felt, and you've expanded to, you've done them in Ogdensburg now, Ithaca, and I know you're still looking. You don't have to give away any secrets, but you've expanded past Watertown now, Andrew. If it wasn't hard, you built that show up. Is it kind of hard again, so to speak, like to expand out into the cities that you haven't done shows yet at, even though the Watertown one's been very successful?
I don't know if it's hard. I think the biggest, asset that we have is being such a tight-knit community of vendors. I know so many customers, I know so many vendors, and now when we have a new show, there's no struggle. There was a wait list for Fulton, and it was the first time ever show. Our Ithaca show had a wait list, and it was the first time we ever did one there. They had wait lists because, we couldn't. The biggest struggle is being from Ogdensburg. Everything is at least 2 hours away. Fulton was 2.5 hours. Ithaca was 3.5 hours. So we don't get a good chance to go, look at these centers first. We go in one day, we talk to them, we talk about, hey, can we get a contract? What do you need from us? These are what we're looking for. But we never get to see the room set up until the day of the show most of the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I know, I won't share them on here, but we've talked about some of the difficulties you can run in when it comes to like tables and setup and people not knowing like, hey, this needs to be done or you were supposed to do this. But again, you make it look probably more flawless than it actually is, with the work you do behind the scenes.
Not a single customer would have known that, we had Fulton on Saturday, and no one would have known that, Friday night at 9:30, I was freaking out wondering if the tables were going to show up.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. But like you said, no one knew unless you told them. And it's easy to joke about it, right? after, like, everything's okay. But during that process, I'm sure you were sweating some bullets there until you knew that wasn't going to be an issue. You can always go BYOT, right? Bring your own tables. I
mean, there's been Watertown shows where we've shown up and, you have vendors show up that aren't even on the list and they say, I'm here for my tables. I talked to you. And it's like, well, I talked to you and I told you were on the wait list, but I guess you're here. And I guess I'm very accommodating because, I'll run to Home Depot, I buy a table, and here you go. You're in the show now.
Yeah, that's funny. But again, it shows that you try to accommodate as many people as you can. You're probably nicer. Not probably. You're nicer than me. I would have been probably more hardline, like, hey, you know what to do. I hope I don't have to explain what a waiting list is. Like, waiting is kind of self-explanatory. Wait till I tell you that you actually have a table and you're not on a waiting list anymore. But, and in your defense, maybe that person knows and just says, hey, I'm going to show up anyway, and kind of just try that and see what happens. And in that case, in that person's case, right, it was fruitful for them, and they got to set up. And very cool having Andrew on. And part 2 of our conversation will be next Friday. So this was part 1 of 2. And man, that guy's got to be busy, between being a dealer himself and expanding and doing all these shows that he's doing now. And he does a great job, right? It's one thing to promote a show. It's a whole nother thing to promote a very good show or an excellent show. He does just that. He cares. It comes through in what he does. And so you'll hear more about that on next episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People Announcer of the Week.
Hello, collectors. This is Ed Green from Sacred Home Sports Cards. Remember, the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People Announcer of the Week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
That's a wrap for this week. Huge thanks to you, the listeners out there, because without you, there is no us. If you like the show, we truly appreciate positive reviews. Big ups to our great guests who drive the show and our awesome sponsors who make it all possible. Sports Card Nation will be back next week, but don't forget to catch either Hobby Quick Hits or Card Mentions coming up on Monday. I'll leave you with this. How do we change the world? One random act of kindness at a time. Remember, the hobby is the people.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.